Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining what is now the final session of the day here in the Access Industry Forum Knowledge Base. The intention of this session is basically it's open to the floor. You now have access to a representative from each of the 11 organisations within the Access Industry Forum to raise your hand, ask them a question, and I will do my best to steer you towards the right person who can give you that answer. So who would like to go first? Young man at the front here.
Thank you. Neil. One of the underlying themes I think that's come out through this morning is the need, and we've just seen about a ready reckoner, but I almost see we need a ready reckoner for costs of all the things that you've been talking about today, or your groups have been talking about, to actually get a level playing field for all the contractors, especially the subcontractors, for when they're pricing. Should they be pricing for the safety equipment themselves, or should the main contractor be pricing for it, or somewhere between the two? And then that should get into tender documentation. There'd be a priced element in the bills. I know I'm taking everything back to cost here, but I think, especially in a recession, that is one of the main drivers that we've got to somehow get to grips with. And I find very much that the contractor ends up not using the most appropriate bit of kit with the, what was the terminology? I mean, anti-trapping device, whatever, which probably is some sort of bleating or radar-controlled element, whatever. That's going to cost more to have on the kit, but it might be the most appropriate bit of kit. But he's not going to price for it. So how do we, as an industry, get hold of that and make it that issue and make it more powerful to help us?
So let me understand the question. What you're asking the AIF members is, can they provide a sort of industry standard price for their respective bits of equipment to help in costing and estimating? Is that right?
To help the QS and the designers at early stages to input that into the cost plan.
Yeah, I think I'm not really sure I really want to direct this to any particular AIF member, because I can probably answer it, I think, on behalf of all of them, is that what the AIF membership is a trade confederations and organisations and associations, and I don't think any single one of us is in any way involved in setting prices for our members. It's a recession, it's a competitive market, it's down to each of our members to actually price it accordingly. I think coming back to you on your question, I think it's down to the clients and the QSs to make sure that they are spelling out who are the right organisations to go to get the right information, and then from there find the right companies to go and accordingly price that particular job. I know it's not what you want to hear, but there isn't one of us who sets prices for our members across the industry. It'd be unethical and unorthodox for us to do it.
I take the point, because it's a commercial aspect you're putting there, but I'm always saying a SPONS level playing field, or whatever, industry norm, that the client can have a cost plan that reflects the safety aspects of his project built into his cost plan as much as he does everything else. Obviously the cost of stone or whatever goes up and down from different contractors. It's getting that built into the cost plan in an informed way rather than just a percentage of the prelims.
Yeah, I think if you go back to one of the first discussions we talked about this morning, which I think you were actually on, what came out clearly from that discussion there was that it's important that you get the right solution providers involved at an early stage. And I think that's where it comes from your client, architect and QS point of view, is that you go to the right solution providers, and from there you talk to them at the early stage, and from there you can then actually put together a fairly sort of concrete cost point of view. If you recall this morning, we were talking about changing slightly the culture, and it was much more getting the client to recognise that early engagement with these solution providers is actually going to have a cost benefit that's going to make savings further along down the project.
Fair enough.
Okay, thank you.
you.
Next question. Yes, sir, front here.
Thank you. I represent a trade association. Our members carry out stack emissions monitoring, so they're climbing chimney stacks, working off platforms,
Right.
access is very often by vertical ladders. And the question we're often asked is, we understand that under the work at height regulations there's a need to have a plan for emergencies and rescue.
Yeah.
but what would be regarded as appropriate under those circumstances? And we're never quite clear on what we should be guiding people towards.
In terms of particularly working on chimney stacks?
Well, they're working on platforms, and there's a possibility, it's very remote, that they might be electrocuted or overcome or faint or have a heart attack.
Mm-hmm.
What sort of measures should they have in place to ensure that they can be rescued under those circumstances? Because they're not working on one site, and it's not their site. They're working on hundreds of sites all around the country, different site every week. So whatever solution has to be applicable to a wide range of sites, and I appreciate some guidance from an expert on that, if there is one.
Okay, fair question. Who'd like to field this? Rob? Yep, great. Rob, do you want to come up to the lectern? Introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, my name's Rob Harris. I represent Facet. We're a safety netting body. Work at height regulations are very clear in terms of responsibilities for rescue. And they dictate that there needs to be a rescue plan in place, and that rescue plan must be workable, and it must be workable at every stage where an incident could happen. So if you have guys working at different sites, there needs to be a rescue plan for each activity that they do, and importantly that if there is a rescue plan, that it's workable, that people know what their responsibilities are in that rescue scenario. The word generic, perhaps there will be elements that would be generic, but you need to take every single case and say, in this situation, we must be able to do that. Have we got all the tools in place to do that?
Does that sort of answer your question?
Yeah, I think it does. But you're just saying that in every circumstance, they have to have the kit, the training, the wherewithal to effect a rescue. Yeah. However remote the likelihood is, the work at height regulations are quite specific. You've got to have that plan. Yeah. You've got to have the kit available. You've got to have people that are trained and competent. No arguments. Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's just what I wanted to confirm.
Yeah, my background is safety netting, and it's almost an antagonistic viewpoint, which would be, unless you can effect a rescue, you shouldn't be using a safety net. Why would you put someone at risk if you can't rescue them from what's been put there for their safety? I don't know if my colleagues agree, disagree.
Is this common practice in other industry sectors? Do people have these systems in place? Because I'm not convinced that they do.
Well, all I can say is what it says in the regulations, and whether they're in place is a management procedure, I guess.
Thanks for clearing that up.
Okay. Do we have another question from the floor at all? I'd like to thank you all for joining this panel. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the final session of day 2 in the Access Industry Forum Knowledge Base. Okay, well, I'll kick off. Keith, I'd actually quite like to ask you a question, if you don't mind. Keith, I just sat through your presentation, and it's doubly poignant as I happen to live in Sutton Bridge as well, actually. But I was interested to note that you did, from what I can see from your presentation, you as a company did absolutely everything within the management of your staff to ensure that what they did was correct, proper, and appropriate for their workplace. Yet nevertheless, the operative that you had fell and died through, from what I can gather from your presentation, just a slight lack of concentration for that particular moment. How is it you were still responsible as a company?
That's a very good question, I suppose, really, but legally you're held to account for everything that happens in your name. So that's the law. The failure I identified really is basically lack of talking. We plateaued. The men were very good. You give them a very risky, high-level job, they're good at it. Give them something very ordinary and boring, they switched off, the buttons have switched off. The idea is you're always tight, you're always in a lethal environment. The problem is we became too comfortable in that environment. Brown was 32 years in, I'm 43 years in, I've got no fear of height. And I suppose that's the problem. I can only equate it with people in the ordinary spheres. It's like driving a car. The road is a very lethal environment, but you have no sense of danger, particularly when driving a vehicle. You have to just keep yourself aware. Now, crude as it sounds, I use the death as an asset within the company and just basically kicked back sides and reaffirmed the basics. And what it is basics. I think Brian was perhaps a bit more dangerous 32 years in than perhaps a young person, because a young person is fearful. Brian wasn't. So I think our mission was the talking and remind ourselves exactly where we are. Everything else was there. I think really, in the grand scheme of things, we've plateaued. Now we can see that it's like industry-wide anyway. You have initiatives, everyone's on it, switched on. You get to the point that's higher. Next thing you know, you get used to it, and I call it wallpaper. Everything seems to be absorbed, and you just get used to your surroundings. Then something seems to hollow out on the inside.
Yeah.
And I think really, we just always have to remind.
Yeah. And, I mean, it's very much a behaviour issue you're talking about there, and it seems. I mean, do you in any way sort of feel bitter that your company was penalised for something that at the end of the day the individual? I mean, it's a bit like if you have a car, you maybe don't. You always put your seatbelt on, but the one particular day you forget to put your seatbelt on is the day you have an accident. You know, the car manufacturer is not to blame. You know, it's the driver's point of view.
Do you have time if I can do a bit of a rant? I wrote this. We did this for Rossby, you see, and have a section which takes about a minute, which would answer the question.
Go for it. Just while Keith's finding his note, I think I mentioned this earlier in one of the discussions that we were looking at. What came across when I watched Keith's presentation, what's come across repeatedly almost throughout the entire days that we've been here so far, is communication, and effective communication is almost at the crux of any single issue relating to safe working at height. Getting your communication right, and getting the mindset right by that correct communication can overcome a huge amount of obstacles and challenges and issues that the industry still has. Simply through communication, we don't, arguably there's no need to continually hunt for the new solutions. All the solutions are probably all out there, arguably. It's how you effectively communicate them that comes, I think, keeps coming through again and again and again each day.
I do hold a distinct view that matters can be improved industry-wide, but it begins with criticisms how the SMEs are viewed. My views may be reinforced by the privileged path that I've recently walked, which provides unique perspectives. In order that the message of safety can be got across, the other party must be on receive. Perhaps people cannot be blamed for not being on receive, when there's a wider culture which encourages them not to do so. The presumption of guilt which predisposes a defending organisation to failure in court is unfair, and it automatically assumes that the defending organisation has no viable views. The malaise of the claims culture is encouraging employers to be reductively risk-averse, so ensuring they are in possession of the despised tick box as material evidence in court. Health and safety has been hijacked and is often used as a threat or a lever, not always as workplace care. The HSE's embarrassment of this phenomenon is revealed by their Myth of the Month campaign. And we all bear witness to our PC as being so hijacked. The health and safety saves lives and prevents injury. Ready meal comments, typical of the soundbite culture, reinforces the use of the character of employers being uncaring, and solely in it for the money. Undermining employees by these and other measures seriously weakens them when in the role as a duty holder, as well as creating a continuous and rising sense of anxiety. Isolation of this nature is against the spirit of the big society, which is, after all, the shared mental model at its widest scale. Finally, I also consider the regulations requiring the HSE to charge for their services, particularly when there's a significant reduction in funding, is turning an organisation from not being self-seeking to being self-seeking. That is a pity. That was my rant bit.
Thanks, Keith. Thank you. I think that was quite a poignant presentation. Thank you.
Thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, any other questions to the experts here on day 2 of the Access Industry Forum Knowledge Base? Okay, right, well, thank you very much for attending. Thank you to the AIF members for their support today. And